conservative, constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
Today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show, I said something regarding Father's Day, and, well, I thought it was pretty non-controversial. I even thought the farthest left liberals would agree. Boy, was I wrong. And in their ongoing quest to destroy the nuclear family, Louisville celebrates supposedly a gigantic and record attendance Pride Festival, but we'll go into just how that festival, while they're real excited about the attendance, points to why the Democrat Party is having such a hard time connecting and being relevant here in Kentucky and even across the nation. Then finally, Pornhub, the pornography giant, has come out and said it will suspend services in Kentucky next month. We'll go into why they are saying that, the law that was passed, and dig into some of the comments regarding whether it's a good thing or bad thing that this law was passed and the arguments for and against it. We'll go over all that and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. But before I dig down into it, for those of you watching on the video format, so that would be people tuning into WBNA 21, there in Louisville, welcome, welcome. Those of you watching on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or any number of other video formats, I want to let you know that this is a Monday through Friday show that is in an audio format the other 4 days of the week. And you can catch those at 1 o'clock on every major podcasting platform, and also on the radio at 9 a.m. on WZXI in the Central Kentucky area. And if you want to see the Andrew Cooperrider Show, well, just reach out to your local station and say, hey, check out the Andrew Cooperrider Show. You should carry it. I'm sure they'd be delighted to know that there's a show like this that exists that talks about specifically Kentucky politics. But without further ado, let's dig down into it. So I posted on Twitter and Facebook a very simple post. It's Father's Day. I'm a father. I have a son. Excited to celebrate Father's Day. And I was seeing a few posts on my personal page of people wishing a happy Father's Day to their significant others when they didn't have kids. They had what they call fur babies, pets, animals, cats, dogs, wishing them a happy Father's Day for that. And I posted that pets are not the same as kids. If you're a man who owns pets but doesn't have children, you're not a father. And I made that just the simple point. Thought it was straightforward. I thought everybody would agree. Be like, yes, having pets doesn't make you a father. But I was mistaken. In fact, it was one of the more controversial things I've said over the last few days, apparently stirring the pot. The comments range from nonsensical, like this one that said, are the incels really picking fights with pet owners now? Which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to call fathers incels. For those of you who don't know, incel stands for involuntary celibate, meaning men who don't get attention from women, which you would think is kind of the exact opposite of men who have kids. Because obviously, men who have children are somehow, some way, have at some point, hopefully, I mean, this is a crazy world, but most likely, have been involved with a woman of some sort, of some kind. Even if it's not biologically their children, they then were probably with a woman who had kids from prior marriage, or they adopted, or as such. But it would be odd to call men who are celebrating Father's Day and saying that pets are not the same as kids involuntary celibates. Odd attack there. But anyways, moving on though to the actual, I guess we'd call them arguments about why it was wrong, something I think some of you watching this are saying, hold on a second. They're saying that because you said that if you only have a dog or a cat, you're not a father, that's wrong. That they said that I was incorrect. You're right. They said that I was super wrong, and here were the arguments about it. Both take compassion, which I can see you're lacking today. Weird expletive thing to be so strongly opinionated about. That seems to be what politics does to people. Here's another comment from, I guess, a Roy Miller. That's it. Take away what little someone might have. It's Father's Day. And yes, you can father animals. Just because they aren't biologically yours doesn't mean anything. I'm sure pet children act more human than those animals you raised. I guess implying that my children are animals. This one from a Katie Baker. Goodness. There's dots in there, so that's why I paused. Have some grace. You never know people's circumstances. And another one, I beg to differ. Some people can't have kids. So let's address some of these ridiculous arguments. First off, that being a pet owner isn't being a father. Like, just start off with the overall claim here that they're trying to make, that somehow raising a child and raising a dog or the same, or cat are the same thing. They're not nearly the same thing. They're not even close to the same thing. I have dogs, have had dogs, have a dog now. I have a human child that is mine, and I have raised him. He's now 12 years old, turning 13 this year, okay? This is what I can tell you. Not even close to similar, but we know they're not close. I could go into the long range about teaching them to read and write and do math and, driving hours for them to attend sports and helping support them in that way. I could go into the financial burden. I could go into a long list of reasons on how we know they are nothing alike. Your responsibility of what you need to do when it comes to a child is not nearly the responsibility of what it takes to raise a dog or a cat or any other pet for that matter. Your responsibility when you're raising a child is you have to teach them how to become a functioning adult. Your responsibility for raising a dog is to feed, water it, walk it, and let it out. That's the most responsibility you have, like on the day-to-day, right? Now, granted, people, I'm sure, they cuddle with their dogs and show them pets and love and everything and play with them, everything else. But your day-to-day, if you feed, you water, make sure they get exercise, that's generally it when it comes to animals. That is not it when it comes to kids. That is not even, that is barely scratching the surface. But we know this intrinsically, okay? Not to be dark, but let's turn dark for a minute, all right? If your dog runs out into the street or your cat runs out to the street and gets hit by a car, it is heartbreaking. It is heart-wrenching. You'll be very sad for several days, I am sure. And you will probably be sad maybe even for months, and maybe you'll even remember them fondly and be like, I'm so sad that they died. But in a few months, most likely, you will just get a new dog to replace them. But imagine what would happen if your kid ran out into the street and got hit by a car. You wouldn't just be devastated for a few weeks at the most. You'd be devastated the rest of your life. There would be nights where you still woke up crying about the fact that your children has unfortunately passed away at some point in your life. You're not going to just go out and get a new kid to replace the feeling of the old child. It doesn't work that way. We know this. The loss of a child is so much more devastating than the loss of a parent, even to those who claim to be fur babies, that they're fur parents. They know for a fact that it's nowhere near the same as losing a child. There's some other comments on this, like, well, some people can't have kids, you're taking away from them. I'm not taking anything away from those people who can't have kids. They are welcome to go out and adopt, foster. They can marry somebody who has children, help raise those children. They got a lot of choices before them that they could have children if they want to have children. That doesn't involve them physically having to birth a child themselves. A lot of options out there. If they want to call themselves a father, they can go get a child to raise and love so they can call themselves a father. And finally, why should I care? Why do you care? Why should we care about this? On today, Father's Day of all days, how could we possibly care about the definition of fatherhood on Father's Day? You monster! Well, why do we care? Because what we see is the left constantly trying to destroy the family, destroy the nuclear family, and that destruction is not only leading to, of course, part of the downfall of our society, but also is part of the reason why the Democrat Party is having such a hard time connecting with people here in Kentucky and even around the nation. We'll have more on that particular side of things after this short break. Are you a product, service, or business trying to reach conservative Kentuckians? Well, the Andrew Cooperrider Show can be exactly what you're looking for. Unlike anything else out there, the Andrew Cooperrider Show reaches conservative Kentuckians statewide through radio, TV, podcasting, social media, as well as email. Reach out to the Andrew Cooperrider Show to see if we have a marketing package that fits your budget. Reach out to the Andrew Cooperrider Show at theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's theandrewshow.com. You can hit the contact tab. Or you can also email the Andrew Cooperrider Show at info@theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's info@theandrewshow.com. Let's be the marketing solution that your business has been looking for. And you're back here with the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Before the break, I was talking about how I'd posted online that Father's Day is for fathers, not for people who have dogs and cats and then call themselves fur parents and say they have fur babies, where obviously it's not the same thing. But it's not surprising, I should say. I mean, I was surprised, but I shouldn't have been. I thought our society, I guess, wasn't as fallen as it was, that we see the liberals and the left was so very offended by this claim and this attack on what they saw as being mean. Right? And people literally saying like, oh, this is all somebody has, is being a fur parent. And you take that from them. How dare you? Real things people said to me. But it's not surprising, like I said, that we see this attack on family values. After all, it is Pride Month. And the left is very determined to attack those family values. And a part of that is to heap on the accolades normally given to those who actually go through the struggle and difficulties of being a parent, of being a member of the family, but instead trying to give that to people who have not nearly achieved the exact same thing. And with Pride Month this year, we're seeing this push even more. You know, it goes in the same vein as to why people got real upset about that. And on the subject of Pride Month, Louisville had their Kentuckiana Pride, I guess it's called, Louisville Pride, whatever, had their Pride event, and they said they had record attendance of like 40,000 people showing up, record-breaking attendance, which I thought this was just like a parade or a festival like in the middle of the city. I didn't realize there was like tickets for it. Tickets for it, I guess. How do you even force that? But anyways, so 40,000 people showing up to this Pride event, and you know, just because a large amount of people show up somewhere doesn't mean it's necessarily a good thing. I mean, after all, in September 1934, 700,000 Nazi Party members showed up in Germany to Nuremberg to, rally for something. Does that mean they were right? 700,000 showed up. That's a lot more than 40,000. Does that mean they were showing up for the right thing? I don't know. But second, in 2023, just to kind of shape this in, how small really 40,000 people is in the grand scheme of things when you talk about the entire state, when you talk about Kentucky, because you'd look at that and say, okay, Louisville's Pride Festival is kind of like the state Pride Festival for Kentucky. And so comparing that out, when we look at the state fair, in 2023, also held in Louisville, in 2023, 600,000 people went to the Kentucky State Fair. 600,000 people. And I want to put this into perspective for you because right now, the far left especially is trying to turn the tide on public view when it comes to pride, when it comes to the LGBTQ people. Because when we look at some interesting questions, when we look at some polling we see out of Gallup, and we look at where the fight for them is over LGBTQ rights, I'm doing a lot of quotations around those because, of course, it's hard to define exactly what they mean by right. It's hard to figure out what they want that doesn't also violate other people's rights. I mean, last week, I believe last Friday, if you missed it, go back and listen. Head on over to theandrewshow.com, hit the Listen Now tab. You can see all the places to catch old shows of the Andrew Cooperrider Show. But anyways, last week, we were looking at this op-ed that was done about ban conversion therapy. And when we really dug into it, what we found is that to them, banning conversion therapy was something they want to do here in Kentucky really meant just banning, literally making it illegal to hold a belief that doesn't agree with the LGBTQ viewpoint. They wanted even churches to not be allowed to unaffirm that if somebody came in and said, I'm gay, you had to accept that. They wanted it to be a legal requirement that churches literally couldn't say that's a sin and then attempt to help people repent from that sin. They would just have to say, well, can't talk about that, I guess. And so we see that coupled with this big push on this big attendance and story, and of course trying to use it to really push out that, y'all means all. We see those two as well. And it's interesting because if we look at Gallup, we see for some questions on gay rights, on marriage, we see that in 2011, there had been a pretty standard increase since then, a pretty solid increase where it really switched, where the acceptance of gay marriage really went up. Actually, according to Gallup, it's now upwards around just over 70%. And that over time, I mean, it went from 70% disagree to 70% agree over time. That's a big, pretty consistent upwards. I mean, we've seen it bottoming out a little bit there as far as the acceptance of that goes. And also, if we look at Gallup, we see the same for the question about should gay and bisexual relationships be legal. We see that over time, people have greatly increased their beliefs that they should be legal. So we see an increase in beliefs that people hold that, legally speaking, the government should be accepting, putting that in quotations, accepting of whatever two consenting adults do. That the government should just basically let people live their lives. If they're not hurting each other, we'll go hands off and leave people alone. And you think this would be a cause of celebration for the LGBTQ mob. You think they'd be very excited to see that people just simply don't want government getting involved in people's lives and their day-to-day, wants government to just leave the LGBTQ people alone to kind of do whatever. But that's not enough for them. And it's not enough for them because of what we see elsewhere, okay? Because what the real problem they're having isn't to do with what people's view is on what the government should do. Because obviously they've been saying, government should leave them alone, but at the same time, they've seen growing support for things like banning children getting transgender surgeries. We've seen things like on women's sports, protecting women's sports, those getting mass appeal and people greatly agreeing with it. So they say, let two consenting adults do whatever, but the moment you involve children and the moment you go outside of just two adults and you want to expand that out into more people, well, now you start to have problems and they start getting very upset. Because, and you can tell when you look over at Gallup, in recent years, the I'm satisfied with how laws are handling LGBTQ issues has stayed about the same, despite those more laws being passed. Because the average adults, while they don't want laws, they aren't stupid. They know men and women are two different biological creatures, and they know kids transitioning surgery is incorrect, and they know obviously that women and men aren't the same thing. And just because one day you wake up and say, you know what, I'm a dude now, or I'm a woman now, it doesn't make you actually a woman or a guy. And so when asked that same question, same people about sports, what do we see? We see that in 2021, it was 62% of people believed in protecting sports, saying that only biological gender should compete in biological sports. But now in 2023, as we've seen the question about legal acceptance go up and more people saying legally, yeah, they should be accepted, we see that now it's 69%, increased by 7 points, saying that sports should be tied to your biological gender, that just because you change your gender and your pronouns and that you demand other people follow doesn't mean you're actually the other type. Also, when we look at an interesting question called asking, is it morally wrong to change one's gender? And in 2021, it was 51% said it was morally wrong to change your gender. Not just like wrong, but morally wrong. Now in 2023, 2 years later, it's up to 55%. Now, at the same time, remember, during the same span, though, of time, we've seen an increase of people in the same polls, too. So it's the same people being asked the same questions, saying that they're okay with the government allowing things like same-sex coupling and everything, that they're okay with that. But what's interesting, at the same time they're saying government should stay out of it, we see an increase in them saying, morally speaking, this is kind of messed up what's going on with this transgender stuff. And then this is now affecting gay relationships because they're getting tied together. This LGBTQ movement is now tying in, they're bringing their craziness around gender, tying that into the overall homosexual side of things. And we're now seeing an increase in people saying that it is morally wrong to be in a gay relationship, with people finding it morally wrong now at some of the highest rates in nearly a decade. So what's going on here? Well, you have a disconnect between gay marriages initially. The belief around this was, well, they just want to live just like me. That really is a belief of they're going to bring on more traditional family lifestyles. They thought, well, I like being married to my wife, or I like being married to my husband if you're a woman, and we have kids and we live a family life and raising a family together and we're doing life together. That's the same thing that homosexual couples are looking for. They're just looking to be able to engage in the same type of more traditional, almost conservative style relationships that we straight couples are engaging in. You actually got a rejection of reality, but also rejection of anything even slightly looking like a traditional conservative relationship. Instead, you're seeing some pretty horrific things going on around the LGBTQ celebrations and movements, things like this. And for those of you not watching this, just listening to this, I just threw up a picture. You have a young girl that is interacting with grown adult males wearing dog fetish gear that is very sexual in nature, interacting with children. I mean, this is disgusting behavior. And the thing is people are seeing it. And so while they're saying that, we don't want to backtrack necessarily on the legal side of things, like live your life to consenting adults, but morally speaking, we're seeing a big problem with the LGBTQ movement, and they really want to try to turn this around. And so instead of recognizing the problems, they go ahead and attack people saying simple things like, hey, like, just because you have dogs doesn't make you a father. No. They can't have that because that is you trying to celebrate a normal conservative lifestyle, which their base doesn't want to do anymore and doesn't have. It became really obvious about the Democrat disconnect. There was 2 events that happened this last week for the Democrats. Very obvious that they're in decline here, having troubles. We'll cover that after this short break. Listen up, my fellow business owners, because I got to tell you about a business that's incredibly important to any company's operations, and that's Amston, A-M-P-S-T-U-N, Amston. It's out of Richmond, Kentucky, and they provide cybersecurity for commercial businesses, and they've got dozens of years of experience working with government and private entities alike. So reach out to Amston today. That's AMPSTUN.com, AMPSTUN, Amston. Reach out to them today. Tell them Andrew sent you over. And you're back here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Before the break, I was talking about how the breakdown around social issues is very interesting. That while people aren't necessarily demanding that their government get involved in standard normal behavior, that the general public as a whole, based upon polling data, is steadily seeing discuss and moving away from the far left on these social issues like the LGBTQ agenda, but on top of that, some other things such as abortion, and as such, they're on a steady move away. The values don't align anymore. And we see that really clearly in Kentucky. The Democrats have really struggled to kind of hold it together. As evidence of this, we've got a few things that happened this past week. The Democrats had their state convention. This is where they have their meeting, the big state meeting where they come together, and then they had their nominating convention, something the Republicans did as well, where they nominate who their electors will be for the national convention in order to nominate the president, but also they do other important, quote-unquote, party work, like talking about things like the platform and making those types of adjustments. It's a big national convention, happens every 4 years, but then you have the state conventions that happen along with them where they select who's going to go and represent them. And the night before, the Democrats had a dinner, and they called it, I guess, the Move Forward Together dinner. And this picture here of it is from Austin Horn's Twitter. He was there. He posted this photo here. And for those of you who can't see it, it's a pretty empty looking photo. Now, I don't like to typically take crowd size into account. I don't know when they took a picture of it, what part of it, were people still filtering in? Was this in the middle of the event, near the beginning of the event, as such? There's a few clues in the photo that tell me this is probably real close to the beginning, if not early on in the event, because you're seeing the event MC, which is the state Democratic Party chair for the Kentucky Democrat Party. He's up there on stage talking into a mic. Some people are standing, some people are over at the food line. I think this is probably towards the beginning where people are kind of first coming in and settling down. I don't think Austin was trying to take a photo to embarrass them, but the photo did embarrass them. Why? Because there are so many empty seats. It's a very empty looking room. And you can actually compare this to a photo from the Jefferson County Republican Party dinner, which happens right around the same time as the state fair. This is just their normal Lincoln Day dinner. Happens every year. This isn't their big state convention that happens every 4 years. No, this is just the Republican Party having a dinner in Jefferson County, Kentucky. Let's take a look at that photo. It is in the same room. They have it in the same venue, in the same room. Same room, same venue. Look how much more full that room is. There isn't an empty seat in the place. Maybe Democrats should have gotten a smaller venue for their dinner and it wouldn't look so small. But there's not an empty seat in that place. Why? Because even in Louisville, where the Republican Party is in the minority in Louisville, there's still a lot of excitement about the Republicans right now in Kentucky. They're vastly in control of a lot of areas, but also there's a lot of not very excited people when it comes to the performance of the Democrat Party in Kentucky, including those in Louisville, because obviously you have the Democrats in charge of the city. With the chief of police issue going on right now, especially, you're seeing a lot of Democrats upset about that. I mean, Joe Girth, liberal extraordinaire journalist, he wrote a big scathing article about how the mayor should have fired the chief a long time ago and hasn't yet. And so, you see them very dissatisfied with that. And then on top of that, you have the school board issues are creating a lot of dissatisfaction with the people, the way the school's being ran, from the point of cutting transportation to spending tens of millions of dollars on sports complex while you're still saying I can't give raises to teachers, to the lack of ability for the kids to come out doing reading, math, writing, those kinds of basic things. And of course, to the secrecy going into it. The school board in Louisville has had a lot of secret meetings where they're trying, against law a lot of times too, to kind of hide things away from people. That's causing a lot of consternation, a lot of people upset about that. And so even for somewhere like Louisville, where Democrats have some power, obviously over the city and the school board, the job that they're doing is so bad that it's not even creating a lot of excitement in that area. Meanwhile, the Republicans, on the other hand, are seeing that they're in the majority. They continue to grow more seats. And they continue to address at least some of the basic things that the base, not of the Republican Party, but that the general base voter kind of wants addressed, at least on the surface, because we've gone into this before, how the media really doesn't cover things the right way. If they did, a lot more people would be dissatisfied with obviously the actual results of the Republican Party. What do I mean by that? Well, when you look at what they accomplished, and I've given examples of this on the show, like CRT, like some others, where they don't really accomplish anything on it, but because they did something even tiny, a little bit conservative on the issue, the liberal media loses their mind, and of course, nobody's really filling in the public on the accurate side of things. But on the same hand, there's a lot more excitement for what the Republican Party is doing and what's going on with it. That's why our primaries are more interesting too. It's the cost of success. Our primaries have more back and forth because there's more people watching what's going on, more people dumping their own money. So this points to just people not being excited. But I also say that they huff their own paint as well. I say this to my wife all the time when we're talking about things. These people are huffing their own paint because they think that this whole, and they did this during apparently this dinner, according to Austin Horn, they emphasized all when they were talking about liberty for all and y'all means all. I talked about that before. That whole push there, they really emphasize that side of things, thinking that's going to win over voters, thinking that your average voter is going to be upset that the legislature stepped in and said, look, you can't chop the healthy body parts off minors just because they think they're a different gender. They really think people are going to be upset about that. And they also really think abortion is going to be a saving grace for them as well. And while the polling's factual, and I've on regular basis on the show, I've gone into how this is wrong and how life begins at conception. That's what pro-life means and all those things. But I do agree that the average person probably sits somewhere right around about 20 or so weeks-ish, less than that, probably 2 months, 3 months-ish in their minds. Not saying I agree with this, just saying this is what I think the average voter's mindset is. is okay if rape or incest. So basically, I think the average voter is not okay with just getting an abortion because of whatever. But if there's a product rape or incest before viability, okay. I think that's the average person's belief. I do. But the thing is that the Democrats really think that by calling Republicans extreme on the issue, they're somehow going to win people over. But in actuality, not only are, Republicans closer when you look at the spectrum, because Democrats are way up till, you'll hear them saying things like abortions between a woman and her doctor, and government and politicians should have no opinion here. They shouldn't be making rules on it, which means abortion up until birth. By the way, up until birth. I mean, we just recently saw Adam Moore, a Democrat candidate out of Lexington, Kentucky. He's running in the 45th House District against Thomas Jefferson. He recently said where he said that decisions on abortion should be left between a woman and her doctor, showing an extreme side of that belief. That's an extreme talking point. And so Republicans, even the most extreme pro-life Republicans, are way closer to the average Kentuckian than Democrats are. But even that, they really don't care though. And I think that's part of it. I mean, we see this in polling data all the time, that abortion is not even close to the important issue for 60-70% of Americans, let alone Kentuckians. And this disconnect really shows itself in a number of ways, and it leaves them struggling a lot of times. And one of the ways it leaves them struggling is in trying to fill key positions like county party chairs. And, we recently saw a story actually by Austin Horn too as well. He's just a political reporter. It's out of season, of course, for the Herald Leader. So he wrote an article about it, and I happened to see it, talking about the Johnson County Democrat Party picking a young man, a 19-year-old, to head up their party. We'll talk about what it means, what he had to say, and hopefully be able to get to the story about Pornhub pulling out of Kentucky after this short break.
Lexington Overstock Warehouse is Central Kentucky's best source for stylish new home furnishings. Don't pay retail. With our low overhead operating structure and big name brands, we offer the absolute best values on new furniture for every room. Shop online anytime at LexingtonOverstockWarehouse.com or visit our weekends only showroom located at 156 West Tiverton Way. Right now, for listeners of this show, we're offering a special discount for our online customers. Use coupon code FREEDOM for an additional 10% off your online order today. Lexington Overstock Warehouse, low overhead equals really low prices.
And you're back here in this final segment of the Andrew Cooperrider Show. On a wonderful Monday before the break, we were talking about how the Democrat Party just is feeling a huge disconnect from the base of Kentucky, from the base voter, from the normal voter of Kentucky. And not just Kentucky, but across the nation. We brought up evidence, of course, of their recent gathering in Louisville, their state gathering in Louisville, and the dinner before, and how it was less attended than just a county party dinner is for the Republican Party in the same county, same place. And pointing to more of these issues, we see a story from Austin Horn about a 19-year-old named Nicholas Hazlitt out of Johnson County. It's funny, he's got the last name Hazlitt for those of you who are economics buffs at all. A Democrat having the last name Hazlitt is funny. Anyways, if you don't get it, you'll have to Google it. Anyways, out of Johnson County, and in this article, he talks about how basically the county party decided to go ahead and elect a guy who's going off to Morehead State University to be their county chair. So, quote unquote, elders, that's what they call them in the article, elders of the party suggested this guy is super passionate, super fired up, super willing to do this or that. They said, let's just face it, we're getting older. And so what they're saying is that, look, we're too old, we don't want to do the work anymore, and the only person they could find in the entire county fired up about being a Democrat, fired up wanting to do the work, was a 19-year-old going away to college. Does that not point to a shortage of people available for resources? Now, Hazlitt does say something interesting, though, in the article, reading now from it, quoting him, "I wish we could go back to a day off about policy and right versus wrong in our community rather than just name calling." Hazlitt said, I'm sick of it. We weren't worried about community investment and development. We were worried about trans rights and abortion. I get it. Some people have different issues on that, and I respect them. Can we not go back to really what builds communities? Do you have running water? Can you afford basic groceries? Do you have a good road? That's the kind of how the governor ran, but in reality, that's not what anybody wants to talk about. He's 100% right. It's a dying party for that reason. That's why they don't connect anymore with Eastern Kentucky. They don't talk about actual kitchen table issues. Things like the economy and jobs and even painting a picture. Now, they'd be wrong because, of course, their push and their selling point would be about government involvement. And, of course, government involvement isn't going to solve your problem, something you think and would hope we'd learn by now. But he's right. They're not communicating on those important issues. But his party will never change that because they don't want to talk about that. That's not what their base wants to talk about. Their base doesn't want to talk about getting people good jobs out in Eastern Kentucky. They want to talk about how a parent should have the right to chop healthy body parts off their children. They want to talk about how, a person needs to be able to abort a child whenever they want to, when that's not what the average Eastern Kentuckian actually wants to talk about. And I think actually Beshear pushing that on his campaign was something that's going to lead them really wrong. They really think that abortion issue on Beshear's campaign was an important selling point, and it wasn't. I don't think anybody really cared all that much. I don't think people care about it a whole lot at all as the general voter. I think it was more the fact that this is a name the Eastern Kentucky Democrats and the Eastern and Western Kentucky former Democrats that are now Republican or what have you, it's a name they voted for before. He was currently in office. His more liberal tendencies they were saved for when it comes to actual policies and as such. And when it came to the actual social issues, they either didn't care or disagreed with him. That's my opinion. I could be wrong, but I think I'm right. And I think the fact that we see Hazlitt talking about, I wish we just would stay away from abortion, and he's a boots on the ground guy. He's saying that, yeah, you may think Beshear's move on abortion makes sense, but it didn't, and it actually hurts us in this area. And I think he's right about that. But it does speak, like I said, this whole thing, the attendance, the 19, everything else, just speaks to what a sorry state the Democrat Party of Kentucky is currently in. Now, we also have this here. Pornhub announced they are suspending services in Kentucky starting next month. Now, I want to explain what law they're talking about here. In this last session, a law was passed that would require pornography websites to verify the age of people before they deliver content. So instead of just clicking a button saying, yes, I'm over 18, I super duper promise, they want to actually make you verify a person's age. The way they would if you were purchasing pornography in person, or purchasing alcohol or cigarettes in person, or gambling in person or online, or buying alcohol online. Literally, pornography was the only one where you didn't have to verify your identity before purchasing, but that's all the law simply was doing. But despite this, we've seen a lot of people being pretty upset about the law in general. Now, I've spent at length a lot of time talking about the different aspects about this law, specifically about people trying to say this is an overreach of governments, a parents' roles, you're opening up the door, it's an invasion of privacy, so on and so forth. And I've responded to a lot of that in previous shows, so I'm not going to go too down into it, but really just suffice it to say, you just need to ask yourself this question. Does the government have a role in passing a law to make sure, passing a law to say minors cannot be served up pornography? Because they cannot consent. They're incapable of consenting. Before 18, in law, we believe you're incapable of consenting. And so because you're incapable of consenting, if somebody shows you pornography, whether or not you want to see it as a child, you are being served up illicit material in an illegal manner. Now, if you believe that government has no role in saying that a child should not be allowed to see pornography, if you think that if a random guy in the street should be legally allowed to hand your child pornographic images as you're just walking down the street, or as the kid's just walking down the street if they're by themselves, 13, 14, you think it's okay that an adult just walks over and hands them to them. I'm not going to win you over to my viewpoint on this. I'm not. But if you do think that's wrong, if you do think that, I agree that pornography and those types of shops and things shouldn't be sold to a minor. But for some reason, when it comes to online now, well, that only falls to the parents. And, my argument back to that has always been, why is it the parents' role to go out and buy blocking software and not the company's role who's making money off of it, in this case, the pornography websites? Why is it not their role to ensure children don't get access? But I do want to talk about two things real quick. One was that a particular one or two people kept commenting this, that they're targeting one pornography website and there'll just be thousands more to go to. Understand this, they're not targeting just one pornography website. This is a law that applies to every pornography website. And it's a civil law too. It requires parents to bring the lawsuit. This isn't a criminal law. So government itself cannot bring lawsuits against pornography companies. How this works is that if a parent finds out that their child has been served pornography by a website and that website didn't have proper age verification systems in place, then that parent is able to sue the pornography website for giving pornography materials to their unconsenting children. That's how the law actually works. So the government really doesn't get involved here. But there's another thing people kept saying about the invasion of privacy side of things. And to those of you who think it's an invasion of privacy, I have to ask you this question. Do you think the pornography websites don't already know who you are? Like the fact that that if you log on to a pornography website, they know you're in Kentucky. They know your address already. They already know who you are. They may not know whether it's you or your child, I guess, looking, but they do know that somebody at your address has logged on to their website. And you know that because they wouldn't be able to suspend services to Kentucky, to users in Kentucky, without knowing where you live. And you're worried about privacy. You already didn't have privacy. And, by the way, with this law too as well, they're not allowed to store that identity information, and that means that they can't turn it over to the government either. So it's not like government can grab that information from them as well. Now, government can already take their website traffic information. In fact, our federal government buys up data from these types of websites all the time. So for those of you worried about privacy, maybe instead of being worried about a law mandating they actually keep it out of the hands of children, you should be worried about the fact that your government is literally buying data, like who's logging onto pornography websites from these websites already. That's what you should be up in arms about. Well, y'all, that's what we got time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Thank you all so much for joining me. We'll see you back here tomorrow. If you're watching on the video format, make sure you head on over to theandrewshow.com and hit the Listen Now tab. Till then, we'll be seeing you.